When I did it when COVID started, and I was doing it on Teams or on YouTube at home, I had all these people. People must have been bored sitting at home during COVID, so I had these people all over the world watching. Yeah, and all of a sudden we started getting some comments where kids told me, people are saying mean things, not about me, just mean things. And I, oh, you're a kid. I didn't even think about it, or I'm just scrambling. You know how much fun that was. So that was good. Good memories, right? But I look back and they weren't even talking about this. They would just say stupid stuff to try to get someone to respond, and then they're arguing about members of my class. Like, what are you guys doing? So, good story. All right, back to this. So make sure you jot something down. Get material down. So let's talk about a few of these. First off, let's go to the very first. Well, we already talked about the first one. Let's talk about the second one really quick. Now, the second one, that's the Southern Platform. Is that right? The Southern Platform. And the Democratic Party, well, we'll come back. But the Southern Platform for the Southern Democrats. And what is their view there? And we say a lot of things, but they have a view. In fact, I even told you 2 words what that view is. Yes.
About document 2.
Yeah, document 2. Because we talked about document 1 yesterday.
They are talking about that the citizens on slaves should be able to bring their property in the territory, and the property is slaves.
Yeah. So do whatever you want. So first off, there's 2 things we can look at. First off, what do we call this idea? Where we must protect slavery. We can take slaves wherever we want. We must have the right to have slaves wherever, however we want, and it must be defended by the government. What do they call that? That's states' rights. Property sovereignty was the voting. And then what was the court case that said they could bring their property anywhere? Dred Scott. So as long as we had that, we got it. And why did they have that opinion? There's lots of reasons why. Lots of reasons why. First off, they want to spread slavery out to protect it. What was that original Jefferson idea where they would spread slavery out and it would go away, but it turned into, that's the fusion. What is the 3/5 compromise? I mean, they want, Northerners would call it what? Slave Party. Now, the South, they didn't call it that, but that's in essence 4 members of Congress. And lastly, what's Calhoun's opinion? His whole ideology that the South would have, yeah. And so that is why they had that point of view. So if you use that sentence, the Southern Democrats believed in spreading slavery because they believed in diffusion or slaves, or they believed in more representation of slave states, or they believed in the positive good theory. Boom, you got that Y card done. How many times do you have to do that in the pair? Again, just 1 additional sentence. That's it. And that first one talks about the Southern view of spreading slavery. So the South, when they seceded, or Southern Democrats even split away from the Democratic Party in the election of 1860 because they wanted to maintain the spread of slavery to protect slavery. Yes.
Have to like add more. Do you just, is that like partly right? What was it?
That's it. That's all
And
you
then the
want.
second part is
Yeah, the second part is 1, but you only needed that for 3. And I know it's 1 additional sentence, but remember, it's only 1 sentence. And the reason I'm saying it like that is, don't worry too much about it. Write it down, move on. Because the clock is ticking. So don't like, I gotta get that. No, just go to the next one. Of course, that's easy for me to say. I'm not the one writing with the clock ticking. I also understand that. But it's true what I said. Let's look at another document. Okay, there are Southern documents, and you notice I lay them out. I kind of lay it out so you can divide it up in 3 or 4 different groups. So you have your 3 body paragraphs. I tried to do it that way. So let's look at another one. Let's turn the page and go to, I'm still doing yours. Let's go to document 5. Document 5 is one of those really good documents. It's from a diary of this very prominent lawyer, George Templeton Strong. And he was a Whig and then became a Democrat. When the Whig Party imploded, he was everywhere. He would go back and edit his diary. This is really common. When he actually published it, he went back and rewrote it to make himself look a little better. Never trust people's memoirs or documents for the complete truth. Oh, sure, you might learn a lot, but they edit them. Of course, right? Not always to make the, to hide stuff. A lot of times just, this makes no sense. Let me rephrase that. But yeah, they'll hide stuff. And He wrote this out. It gives lots of stuff on this. For example, what is a tab on November? Yeah, November 12th and November 15th. That's just right after the election, and what's pretty clear what's going to happen. And what states are going to go? I do have my copy. What states are these? They have the highest percentage of what? Isn't that outside of, we know that, right? That gives us a nice little tidbit. Already the slaves with or the states with the highest percentage of slaves. There was talk of secession as early as 2 weeks after the election. So you're using the document, but here's the big thing. You're adding what you know. You're relating the document to what you know. Oh, if you didn't know that pointer, you think it didn't pop in when you're writing it down. There's lots of other stuff when we get there, but that's a good example. And that's awesome. People boxed it, underlined. That's a really good point. It's inevitable. Why? We know the most slaves. Let's go down a little bit further. This one, I'm just going to point out his attitude. What did he say was the biggest problem? And that next big paragraph, it's on November 26th. Yes.
That the two couldn't coexist.
Now, he said that down the road, but he actually said something was even before that. Basically, the South, regions corruption in the North, letting people vote. Once they let people vote, all of a sudden, everybody, all of a sudden, all these issues came out. It never would have happened if we wouldn't have universal suffrage. We let the rap like you people vote. And look what happens. Who should be making the decisions for us? Me. That's what he's saying there. So all these other things, the corruption and all these, why? Universal suffrage. That's why he was a Whig. Then ironically became the Democrats because he thought the Republicans were too radical. That, like I said, the whole party thing was thrown. I was like, isn't that kind of funny? Like, in a very dark way, yeah.
Like the very first one said that Lincoln is elected.
Yeah. But when Lincoln was elected, when he was elected, the whole point was he was worried that it might be Breckinridge. Breckinridge was the Southern Line. And so even though he was a Democrat, he wanted Lincoln. Because he thought Lincoln was a moderate. But you'll notice he begins to shift in less than a month to the Democrats, the Republicans. In fact, he calls them Black Republicans. And that was a term for where they want equality. So that's actually a good question. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, at first, Lincoln's great. 3 weeks later, he's going to destroy the world. Now, let's get to this. We know they can't coincide. He mentions two. So we got the part they can't coincide, and he kind of blames both North and South. But here's the big things I think you can use this for. Another big two ways in an essay. It talks about, he mentions about abolitionists, but not until 1850. But the clamor of the South about the admission of California, the question of slavery. What's he talking about? What big laws, 3 of them were passed that make up what? Compromise of 18. And he says, that's what got the abolitionists going. Now, that's not very good history. But the belief was we might have made it to that compromise and that clamor, that division that divided the country. What's the next thing he very specifically mentions? He mentions the repeal of the Missouri Compromise and Stephen Douglas. What law is he talking about? Repeal Missouri Compromise. Stephen Douglas proposed it. What law is that? For the Transcontinental Railroad. Repeal the Missouri Compromise. Kansas, Nebraska. Oh. Now, we will talk more about brainstorm lists down the road, but once we said Kansas, Nebraska, everyone's, oh yeah, Kevin. Did everyone, I hope, do that? I hope. Oh yeah, I remember that. You're coming in prepared, you're gonna do your outline at home. So I know you're gonna have your notes. You can look things up. But you do have to kind of go through things if you don't have an opportunity to look through your notes, because it's so easy to forget. And so we will go through the process. It's called brainstorming of how you learn how to do that. But that gives you 3 really good things here. When secession was going to happen to slave states, we have Kansas, Nebraska, and compromise. So it gives 3 examples. Let's go to another one. The very next document, excerpt from South Carolina Ordinance of Secession, December 20th, 1860. Wow. So first up, why did South Carolina secede? What was the number 1 reason they seceded? They made it very clear in here. We're looking at document 6. Document 6. Now you can look at this page as long as you want. Document 7 and 8 on there. But I'll tell you, everything's in document 6. All right. What do you say? What do they say? What's the reason? What about? Yeah, the North is hostile to slavery. Boom, period, and that's it. That's what when people say, oh, the South, it wasn't about slavery, it was about other things. That would have been a major shock to the states that seceded. What? We didn't secede about slavery? We should. Well, why did we write this down? But they mention a couple things very clearly. First off, what speech or what are they referring to when they said government cannot endure permanently have slave benefits? Who are they referring to?
That was the way.
And that's what person and what debates? Now, if you don't remember Lincoln Douglas, that's perfectly fine to say Lincoln said it, but that's what they're talking about. And what court decision? Dred Scott. Dred Scott. So that's it's the Dred Scott decision. So they're saying we have a man who's hostile to slavery as president, as showed by his speech in the Lincoln Douglas debates, how he will not enforce Dred Scott. Boom. And therefore, they believe that Lincoln is going to get rid of slavery. And they also believe that free soilers were lying. What do free soilers really want to do? Completely. And trigger a what? And soon they'll have a person that will represent all their fears about slavery. But we just started in tomorrow. John, we started meeting tomorrow. Come here Saturday. Oh, I really did. Yesterday, John Brown. Abraham Lincoln is John Brown in disguise. In fact, without his beard, that's why he grew the beard. Yeah, it's all coming together, isn't it? Illuminati, aliens, John Brown. Yeah. Yes. You're just doing, you're doing the whole, yeah. So let's look at it now. Oh, one more thing about why did they think that way? The election of 1856. Remember the election of 1856? So Buchanan was elected president. Who was the Democratic or the Republican nominee? John C. Freeman. Free states, free labor, free speech. There we go. Boy, you guys are ready. You're ready for to be speech writers. Okay, so they got their man elected, the dough-faced Buchanan. But how did the South feel after that election? They weren't happy. What do they think? They're losing power. And that's it implied when it says the belief that slavery is in the course of ultimate extinction. Someday, the North is going to get rid of slavery. Maybe not today, but in 1864, 1866, 1872, and if we don't do it now, we're weak. And that's what they're thinking. That is why. Hey, they didn't like the Free Soilers back in 1850, but in 1860, they're looking at the map. A Northern Free Soil Party, and they got their man elected, and he wasn't even on the ballot in 11 states. Yes. You're right. Ironically, by seceding to protect slavery, they ended slavery. By firing on Fort Sumter would end slavery. Yes. forced the North to act, and also forced men like Abraham Lincoln. That was, you thought, oh, well, slavery should go away someday, and we'll send the former slaves to Africa. By the end, he wants equality for all men. But we're skipping a little bit less than half the population at the time. But that's still a massive step. And there's still big steps to go. That's the point. Let's look at the last one. All right. Now, there's lots of reasons why you look, oh, I use this map. Well, it shows we can really see a sectional divide, can't we? Look at the map. There's a huge sectional divide. But there's more. The sectional divide. The Republican Party is only in the north. But what's the big reason? Why is it like that? Yes. But he wasn't even on the ballot in the South. There's another really big reason why it's so divided. It's even though you're right about what's going to happen about the Civil War, but not the election's a little bit different. Yes.
The Democratic Party was split between Douglas.
Did everyone hear that? That is the big issue. The Democrats split over slavery. And when the Democrats split, what does that mean? They'll split the vote in every state. And who's going to do better because of this? The Republicans will do better. Third parties take away, especially when one of the parties split, take away from each other, take away from another party. Southern Democrats took away from the Democratic Party. Lincoln's elected president. Look at the numbers. Look how many votes Douglas got. He was the Democratic nominee. I know it says Northern Democrats, but he's a Democrat. He got way more votes than Breckinridge, but he couldn't win in the states. Remember, presidential elections are not national elections. They're individual little elections in each state for the electoral votes. Because Douglas and another candidate, Bell, so split the vote, Lincoln won Douglas's home state. Now, I know that's Lincoln's home state, but Douglas was a well-known and popular politician there. They split the vote. That is why it happened. So that's why when you look at a map like that, look at this little thing. That little box, it'll tell you so much. That is why. And so let's look at the outline. We have lots of different outlines. The outlines are very the same. This one has a brainstorm list. And I'll show you what a brainstorm list down the road. One more little step we have to do. They really do help. I'm not kidding. It's the same basic outline you had before. And this one person put 3 for each. And I'll tell you why in just 1 second. But this is a brainstorm list of just kind of things to trigger your memories, to go through all the events that happen. We don't need it for this one, but we will start doing it afterwards. Thesis? We know that, right? We already. Then 2, 3. And this is what he did. 1 fact. And then he wrote doc 2. You can just put 2 or whatever. These are numbered. Sometimes we get numbered. Sometimes we get letters. Doesn't matter. But just the thing about this is it relates what you know to the document and then you can remember and write it down in your essay. And this is on Teams. So I have a copy of this on Teams. It's a sample outlines. They're all there. I have it on. You can have this when you come in. It's out. And this will, then you put it on top of your essay when you turn it in. And just 1 or 2 words for each. That's all you need. But don't forget the documents where you put them in. Just put 1 and you know I'm going to add it in this paragraph. And you might think, I won't forget, or I don't have time, or don't worry. Start writing. That's what you forget. So easy. Especially when hands start getting tired. Or like you make 1 mistake and you get a little frazzled. Then you really start forgetting things. So get it down in a quick outline. And you'll notice there's 3. So there's 1 more thing you have to add. At least once or twice, you need 1 additional fact. 1 additional piece they call outside information that you know. Outside of the documents. So 1 more thing about the positive good theory of slavery. 1 more thing about the fear of slave rebellion. 1 more thing about the Democratic Party split or Lincoln being elected. 1 more fact. He did it. He added an alternate. See what he did? Because he's thinking, I'm going to make sure I get facts in. But you need at least in 2 of the paragraphs, 1 more fact. That's what. One more, that's all, just one more sentence. So what can we have on Tuesday? 5 and paper. 5.
Are we gonna use this one too? Or do we use
No,
this to
I'm gonna go.
write?
No, you can have this out. But don't write to, that's fine, but are your whole essay?
Oh, no.
I know. You can have your documents, your outline, and you can have paper to write with. And one more time, I'll let you use line paper. I know, I give too much. Yeah. Pencils or pen. Now, starting second semester, it's only pen. Because the AP exam is called the. Pen's actually easier to write with. It really is. You don't have to press down as hard. Your hand doesn't get as quite as tired. I know there's a mistake issue. I know, but we'll work on it. All right, let's go put this way and get going. The thing about DBQs, they give you hints. They do, they give you big hints. You get to hear.
Yeah.
Right here? Yeah, so you want to be more, is this right where we quit? It's cold. How about 4 inches of snow? Is that about what normal around here, my house? Anybody get any snow? No snow? Couple of the passes between Montana and Idaho got 4 feet. So it's a good little blizzard coming through. We'll get another one, another blizzard might come through on Monday, Tuesday. Yes. Really? Yesterday? Oh. Oh,
So.
I could see that. And everyone forgets how to drive, and then you can't see as well. What is a martyr? Yes.
A martyr is a person that, like, if you were like a leader and then they get killed and everyone rallies behind their ideals because they died for what they thought was right.
Yeah, they died for a cause.
They died for a cause, and the people that believe in that cause are like, look at what happened. We need to support this cause because they're killing.
He died, and he died because he believed so much we must follow him. You see this a lot. That's a martyr. And that's, did he really want to start a slave rebellion? The answer is almost certain. But he wanted people to notice. I think he probably thought he was going to escape. You know, and like free some slaves and run away back to the north and make a big deal about it. But they hesitated in Harper's Ferry when they actually attacked. And they were going to get pikes, and they had new Sharps breech loading, so they loaded from behind. Big advancement in weapons. Sharps breech loading rifles. And they were going to give these to slaves, but there are virtually no slaves there. And so they took the arsenal, they hid in, this is where, right here, it's called the Firehouse. It's still there, they've moved it. But if you go to Harper's Ferry today, you walk into a town of 1859. They still have old shops and selling goods you could have bought in a shop in 1859. Okay, they got a few other things, but it's one of the neatest places I've been. It is one of the most beautiful places I've ever gone to. And I've been to Jordan, Montana. So that's all I'm gonna say, and it's better than Jordan. And if you haven't been to Jordan, oh, I don't know what to tell you. We should get on a school bus and go there right now. And how about this? You guys go on a school bus, stay there for a few weeks, and let me know what it's like. Okay, moving back. This is the poster from it, looking down on it. It's really, really cool. No, I got nothing for the West Virginia Department of Tourism. I believe that sincerely. Okay, so with that. They got capped, they basically allowed themselves to get surrounded. The militia came from all over, you know, there's militia because of slave rebellions, even though there weren't a lot of slaves, there's militia. But the big thing was Marines, which are naval infantry, they were a tiny little branch of the United States Navy. It would become much bigger in the 20th century. But they have a few US Army cavalry, would come and surround the firehouse. And Brown allowed himself to get captured there within. He hesitated to move. Basically, really wasn't sure what to do after they captured him. The commander was a guy named Robert E. Lee. Yes, he keeps popping back up, a Virginia plantation owner, slaveholder. And guy who was a hero of the Battle of Chapultepec. But they surrounded this, and eventually using big heavy ladders, they ran through the front door and took them, killing or wounding virtually everybody who was in there. Brown was wounded, captured, and tried for treason. And you would not believe what a big impact this trial had and his attack. This was the South's greatest fear, and many in the North who might have done lip service of how dare we have this terrorist act, at the same time would be finally someone standing up to the South. Finally, someone is doing something about their bullying. At the trial, he would be condemned to death, and he would pass a note that would be read and published in newspapers all over the United States. And depending on your point of view, you have a different meaning from this, but that's what he said. And I like that for a lot of reasons. But first off, what's the crime? Yeah, slavery. What's the guilty land? So, the United States. Because as a nation, we have allowed this. Those who voted in the United States and the government officials have allowed this. Banks and industry in the North have profited off of slavery, even though there weren't many slaves in the North. It's the United States did this. And what's he predicting? One more thing. He vainly flattered himself without very much bloodshed it might be done. Well, if he really meant to cause a slave rebellion, that's a lot of bloodshed. So he's being a little hypocritical there, but he would be executed. Militia from all over Virginia and other places from the South sent representatives to watch him hang. And one regiment would come from Richmond called the Richmond Greys. And these militia wore all kinds of different colors. Some had blue, some had gray, some had black, some had these really gaudy uniforms of red and blue. They called zouaves. But the Richmond Greys, one member was an actor. His brother was a really famous actor, but he was going to soon become one of the most famous actors in America. Known for his acrobatics, he did all kinds of stuff on stage. He was part of the Richmond Greys. His name was John Wilkes Booth. You might have heard of him. He witnessed the death of John Brown. What would John Wilkes Booth do 6 years later? He would assassinate Lincoln. Yeah. So we're jumping right to here. The reaction would be huge. To many Southerners, this seemed to confirm the positive good theory of slavery. No slaves joined John Brown. Or there were not many slaves there, but they didn't care. So yes, we are civilizing. The slaves like slavery. And it also convinced them that all free soilers are John Browns in disguise. Lincoln is really John Brown. Also, look at the slave codes. The big thing is we better get our militia ready. Ironically, ready right before the Civil War. And yes, that would give the South an advantage in the first couple of years of the first year of the war. And so there was no more polarizing figure in American history than John Brown. In the North, yes, many, including Abraham Lincoln, would give lip service to him, but a lot of them would be split and saying, he's not a terrorist, or we would say in today's term, he's a what? He's a freedom fighter. He might be called a vigilant for Kansas, but he's fighting for freedom against the bullies that run our country. I mean, you can imagine those who are enslaved, they're not looking at John Brown saying he's a terrorist. It's fine. They're looking at him saying, finally, somebody's doing something. And John Brown's body would be the song that many Northern soldiers would march to war. The United States Army singing John Brown's body. And this seemed to confirm Northern ideology, that we have a system based upon initiative and courage and opportunity for all. And the Southern system is decrepit and horrible. They're even willing to kill or do whatever it takes. So for both sides, this seemed confirming. Now this is John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. Or we'll hear a little bit of it right here. This is from a great video that at Harper's Ferry they used to show called To Battle with the Land. They don't show it anymore, but fortunately, somebody was able to squirrel away a copy of it. Julia Louise Howe would take the music of John Brown's body and write the Battle Hymn of the Republic, probably the most famous song from the Civil War. And instead of John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave, it's glory, glory, hallelujah. That's how it goes. Great song. And so with that, the election of 1860, then, yeah, Dred Scott was big. Kansas, Nebraska was big, but everybody's talking John Brown. Well, the Democrats had their convention in Baltimore, and it looked clear. Stephen Douglas, the little giant, popular sovereignty. Southern Democrats stood up and walked out. So the Democrats are split now, and they would nominate Stephen Douglas. Yes,
you can, but not.
he didn't want to. He saw what was coming.
Yeah.
He wanted to hide under his desk,
Oh.
and I'm not really exaggerating. So, Stephen Douglas, sticking with popular sovereignty. Southerners walked out. The same exact thing's going to happen in 1948, when Harry Truman will propose ending the apartheid in the United States called Jim Crow laws, legalize segregation, and Southern Democrats walked out. And you have this weird thing of the Democratic Party where you have Northern Democrats pushing for equal rights and Southern Democrats fighting as hard as they can. Eventually, that would blow up the Democratic Party in the 60s. And those Southern Democrats, they would eventually become Republicans. But that's another story for down the road. They met in Charleston, South Carolina. Obviously, right? This is Southern Democrats. They don't really have a party. They're all strung together. And they nominated a Tennessee or a Kentuckian. I'm sorry, Tennessean. And I got the states in my head. Like his mustache. And of course, we know who this is, right? John C. And Breckinridge. By the way, you notice the uniform? What uniform is that? That's a Confederate uniform. So he would become a not very effective Confederate general. And you'll notice one other thing. You see the button gone? So all the paintings of Napoleon, where he had his hand here. They did all the propaganda paintings for Napoleon when he was Emperor of France. His hands are really hard to paint, so they would hide it. They also copied it even with photography. So he had his hand in here for one of the pictures, and took it out for this one. And so, what was their position? States' rights. But we all know states' rights meant pro-slavery. Period. So now the Democrats are split. But they're not done splitting. Another party of former Whigs and some border state Democrats would form the Constitutional Union Party. And their nominee, former vice presidential nominee, former vice president, politician, very well known. And I swear to you, I am not making this up. John C. Bell. And what was their position? The Constitution. I don't know what that means either. And the big thing about that one was the Constitution clearly was failing when it came to slavery. Also citizenship and vote. Those weren't in the Constitution. They weren't addressed. The Constitution was not working to prevent war. Yet the Constitution, whenever anyone says, I will defend the Constitution, and therefore we got to watch your wallet, because they might be hiding something. And then the Republicans are in great shape. All they have to do is nominate somebody with a Democrat split. They could win even if they're not on the ballot in any of these 11 states. You don't have to worry about Hannibal Hamlin. So Abraham Lincoln, yeah, sorry, Hannibal. But Abraham Lincoln. Why Lincoln? He's not a prominent politician. He's not nationwide prominent, but he got to, and so you just get this tomorrow then. And he's not prominent, and oh, you see, free speech, free homes, free territory, a lot, stick with the same free. But he had a good reputation from the spot resolution back in 1847 for the Mexican-American War. He had a good reputation from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And so a few knew him, and then they could create a whole kind of legend about Abraham Lincoln. Because he did start from virtually nothing and build his way up, and they could just glorify this free labor idea. What do we call a candidate from nowhere? Yeah, this is a perfect dark horse. And so other prominent candidates had more of a record. He didn't have a big record, so they could create it. He had no vote, or not very many votes he needed to defend. Only the spot resolution, and that was relatively popular still in the North. Yeah.
No, they can make up the kind of stuff bad and good. Can they also make up the kind of stuff?
Exactly. So there is a dark side to that, sure. You go against exactly right. And that's always playing with fire then if you don't have a record. So you can make up stuff about it. It's harder to do though with somebody who doesn't have a lot of public record before the election. It's easier to do with someone who has a long record, so then you can enhance the one thing they did. And so with that, so Lincoln was nominated, and the convention chose him in Chicago. He's waiting at Springfield, got the news. He was nominated. And then it's one of those, yay, I'm nominated. Oh, I'm nominated. But, oh, I got what I want. Okay. But here's the platform, and it's an amalgamation of free soil Democrats and Whigs. It really is a combination of both. And so free soil, no slavery territories. They want massive government aid for a transcontinental railroad. Also, to encourage these small farmers, remember the Jeffersonian Republican idea, a homestead given to people, yes, stealing the land of the people who live there. So we'll come back to this, but 160 acres of federal government land, if you improved it, 20 years, higher tariff, and a vague idea of workers' rights. Lincoln spoke very openly of, in a free labor system, workers should have the right to strike for better deals. He would not fit in the Republican Party of just 25 years later. The Republican Party, that part will kind of go away. This is a very unique kind of Republican Party. And all of these would basically pass in some way. Even the workers' rights temporarily a little bit during the war. It would only be temporary. But they all passed. Why? There's no South. So they couldn't oppose it. I should add, isn't this a cool picture of Lincoln? I don't know why I like that. He looks cool in that picture. And he was clean shaven. He would not grow his beard till after the election. And yes, it would be, yeah.
Where does he get his hat?
He would wear, that was a really common hat. But he liked wearing, you'd see him with that silk stovepipe hat in the 1850s. But he would wear it all the time. It's one of those funny things. He's 6'4", taller than almost everybody, and liked to wear that's where he looked taller. He had that thing he liked to show off a lot. You ever think about Lincoln, you think, oh, he's like this very humble. No, he would. Lincoln was a person, yeah. I'll get to it.
Oh.
And so, this picture, and he would grow up, a 13-year-old girl, yes, it was a 13-year-old girl, would write him a letter right after the election and say, you look better with a beard. And he's got to go, you're right. So he grew with a beard.
Actually happened.
Yeah, that really happened. That's a true story. And so, they made up this whole story about him starting from nothing, working on a keel boat on the Mississippi River. Now that's true, but they enhanced the hardships that he had to work hard. But what they really hit is how he would make money splitting rails for split rail fences. See that fence in the background? You shut the light off. And so you take logs and you hammer a wedge in and then pound it through, either with the back end of an axe. These axes are heavy, or you're with a sledgehammer. Yes.
The kind of findings about the hammer.
Hit me?
Yeah.
Right.
He's coming for us all, doesn't he? And he looks a little psychotic in that picture, doesn't he? Yeah. So they really played at this humble roots. Here it is, person, the only way to survive doing the job that so many common people have to do. So he's like you, but he kept rising. That's what free labor is. So they really exaggerated it and pushed this idea that he's just old Abe. And he used to wrestle with people and do competitive wrestling. Yeah, he would. And he would box and do all these kind of things, just like a common man. But at the same time, rising up in the ranks as a lawyer and politician. Free labor. And I really like this cartoon for a lot of reasons. The psychotic look. I'm not sure what that is. And then the creepy possessed doll over here. Doesn't that look like from a horror movie? He's possessed. But he's splitting this rail. And it's hard to see, but it says the Democratic Party. That's a clever cartoon, isn't it? Because they are split. So that's how they exaggerated. He hated being called Abe. He liked being called Mr. Lincoln, even by his wife. He didn't like the name Abraham. But Honest Abe, no, you did not call him Abe. But Joseph Stalin, he liked to be called Uncle Joe. Why to? So 1860 election, let's talk about some of the cartoons. Here's Lincoln, Douglas, and Breckinridge ripping apart the country. Who's that gluing it together? Who's the Constitutional Union guy? Bell. So that's a pro-Bell cartoon. He's trying to mend the country with the Constitution. I'll show you a couple of these cartoons. These are pretty great. Here's one. Here's Lincoln and you know, this is like technology. You notice the train, modern. And here's the old Democrats with donkeys or jackasses pulling apart. Douglas, Breckinridge, and here comes a train smashing apart. Here, though, is maybe my favorite one. I think it's going to be, yeah. So here's Lincoln and Douglas racing to this is the old rotunda for the Capitol. The current rotunda they're actually building during the war. They would finish it during the war. Split rail fence. And remember what I told you. What does that represent here? Slavery. And here it says, here's Douglas, and they really emphasize the height. They said, how can I get over this split rail fence? And it says, you find me in this here fence, Master Douglas, implying the slavery issues, keeping it from the White House. And here's Lincoln saying, they can't stop me, for I built it. Get it? But for some reason, it doesn't look like he's carrying a ham on a stick. Ah, ham! So with that, that's too creepy. The Wide Awakes were supporters of the Republicans, and they did these martial military-like processions through town, and they would support Lincoln, and they would dress all in capes, blue capes, like a military formation, and so it felt like war. And they carry these lanterns that when they're on, they kind of look like an eyeball. And the whole point is now we're awake to your bullying. And so now this is Northerners saying, we're not going to take it anymore. And to the Southerners, this was seen as a direct affront to them. When the election finally happened, and then we got a couple signs here. These are other signs for the campaign. Okay, I just thought these signs were funny, so I put them up. Okay, so Lincoln would win with less than 40% of the vote. That means the vast majority of people wanted somebody else. Not only that, look how many Democrats there were. There's significantly more Democrats. There's almost 14 million Democrats in the North. But Douglas couldn't win the majority of states. He lost Illinois by a few hundred votes. But that means Lincoln got all the electoral votes in that state. Yeah. Remember, it's winner take all. So today, if you win California by one vote, you get all 53. And what happened a month later, less than a month later? Or more than a month, what am I saying? Secession. Okay, so we'll finish this class a little bit up tomorrow, Monday. If you have any questions for the DBQ, I'll take the first part of class on Monday, answer any questions. And, oh, one more thing. I will check, so I'll check Sunday evening. If you want, and I'll do it Monday too. If you have a question on the outline, or your thesis, I'll answer, okay? Okay, I have to shut this off. Because I'll get a copyright issue if I'm recording.
Oh, you still stop before the